Now, let's get talking about this very controversial issue, because you know the scripture and the kind of craziness of the miraculous supernatural Old Testament has caused skeptics to scratch their head and make statements for many generations. So when you go back in time to someone like Samuel Butler and read this statement, the Bible may be the truth, but it's not the whole truth and nothing but the truth. You can see I might be one to accept certain aspects of the Old Testament, certain aspects of the Genesis account, but the flood, really? That one I think I can leave out, because there may be some truth in there, but that can't be true. Or what Mark Twain says here when he says the Bible has noble poetry in it, and some clever fables, and some blood-drenched history, and a wealth of obscenity, and upward of 1,000 lies. That's confidence building, don't you think? As a Christian, to hear that our hero here, Mark Twain, was so adamantly against the scripture. But even in our generation, the generation that our young people is exposed to, with the kind of new atheism that they're exposed to from authors in this culture, don't think for a second that they're not getting it full force and much more aggressive than this. Let's take a look at what some of the people are saying today. Someone like Richard Dawkins, probably one of the most well-known atheists in the world today. I'm sorry to take a sledgehammer to so small and fragile a nut, but I have to do so because more than 40% of the American people believe literally in the story of Noah's Ark. We should be able to ignore them and get on with our science, but we can't afford to because they control the school boards. They homeschool their children to deprive them of access to proper science teachers, and they include many members of the United States Congress, some state governors, and even presidential and vice presidential candidates. The problem isn't just that you silly people believe in fables. It's that you silly people are sometimes in control. And that's why folks like this are no longer benign about their aggressive denial, their aggressive opposition to Christianity, is that it's actually creating a world that they think is dangerous. A world in which religious fundamentalists like us will fly planes into buildings. So they want to address this kind of thing in their writings, and boy, are we seeing a lot of that now. And when it comes to the issue of the flood story, do you think they really have to do much convincing to a young audience in secular universities that this story is such a joke? This is such a fable? They don't spend a lot of time arguing scientifically why it's a fable. All they typically do is just describe the story. You know, that a flood, the globe was covered, every piece of land was covered with water. Really? How much water would that be? And that every single thing on the earth was destroyed. Every human was destroyed by this flood, really? Except for some small group, a family who survived. Oh, what about the animals? Oh yeah, they're all destroyed too. Except, they got pairs of the different species on the boat. Really? All of them? Oh yeah, all of them. Oh, and they got on a boat and they survived this in the water. Yeah. How does that sound to you? Does that sound reasonable to you? There are times when the skeptics will get in front of debates, like when I saw Christopher Hitchens debate William Lane Craig at Biola several years ago when Hitchens was still alive. And he simply had to discredit his opponent like he typically does. He'll ask the audience, look at his opponent, and demonstrate the ridiculous nature of his opponent by asking a simple question. Do you believe in the virgin birth? Yes, I do. I rest my case. Do you believe in the flood of Noah? Yes, I do. I rest my case. You're ridiculous. So I think it is important for us to meet the challenge, don't you? Is this a piece of history? Or is Mark actually asking us in this series he's preaching, there's some good stories we can learn in Genesis and some good stories we can learn from the flood story. Sure, it's fable. It's like Dr. Seuss, but Dr. Seuss teaches good things too. But rather than use Dr. Seuss this morning, we'll use the account in Moses. I don't think that's what he's trying to get us to do. I think he actually wants us to read the text the way that Moses wrote it. Moses wrote it as history. He wrote it as a history in which people preceded Noah and people followed Noah. Noah's in a chronology of people who really lived. So let's take a look at it and see if we can actually make any sense of it from that perspective, not as though it's some convenient, usable delusion.